Ukrainians came up with absolutely mind-blowing, genius victory plan for this winter, and today I will give you details of what is about to happen. Besides that, according to President Zelensky, Russians already gradually fleeing Crimean Peninsula, and also there are evidence of them using so-called punishment holes. But more about all of this in just a couple of minutes. What's up, investors? It's the Russian dude. And let's get straight to the point and talk about some ridiculous Russian propaganda. So, today we have actual propaganda, because some Spetsnaz or Special Forces of Russian Army representatives, they came pretty much to the school, including to the elementary level kids, and they started talking about how good it is to be a soldier of the Russian army, and they were answering some not totally pre-made questions, such as, for example, what is the real man of Russia should be? And I will not be absolutely surprised if the answer to that question is that the real Russian man should be willing to sacrifice his life for the greater good of the motherland, for communism, for the leader Putin, or whoever is coming after him, maybe Putin's clone or Putin's double, triple, quadruple, fifth-puple, sixth-puple. So, and I mean, just think about it. This is what they talk about with elementary level kids. But that's just Russia. For this reason, I'm very curious about you guys. What do you think? Should such things as war, military, being a soldier be discussed with the kids, including the younger generations ones, maybe even in the kindergartens and in elementary schools? And please let me know down below in the comments what do you personally think. But okay, now let's quickly talk about maybe not so pleasant news, is that Russia has allegedly 1 more year worth of munition. And then we go to the east of Ukraine and talk about these punish holes. And then we're gonna switch our attention to the south, where Russians are gradually leaving the peninsula. And then we'll finalize everything with this absolutely and simply genius plan of Ukrainians for this upcoming winter. And so, first of all, speaking about the extended munition supplies of Russians, they are estimatedly having right now approximately 4 million more artillery shells, and about 10+% of it came from its most recent partner, North Korea. And according to some military analytics, if Russia keeps up the current pace of the offensive, or maybe even slows down a little bit, just these supplies alone will last them a little bit more than 1 year. And also, speaking about the ammunition, Russians brought its modernized S-300 missiles to be with lower range. Honestly, I do not know why you should modernize missiles to make them of a lower range instead of longer, further range, but this is just Russian logic, so let's not question it. And so basically they brought them to Bryansk, the bordering region with Ukraine, which pretty much allows us to assume that they might be attacking bordering regions in the very near future. But don't worry, some things within the Russian army, they remain the same. Such, for example, according to this most recent picture, Russians received a new batch of tanks, which are T-55s from 1958. And the very best part about it is that they had to remove the anti-aircraft gun from top of it and to install this anti-drone protective net, which, as you already know, pretty much never works. But okay, enough about Russia. What about Ukraine and its Western partners? Well, first of all, according to Ursula von der Leyen, they're making a new project which will allow Ukrainians, as soon as it is passed, to use frozen Russian assets for the post-war reconstruction of Ukraine. In addition to that, during its military exercises in Germany, Ukrainians started to emphasize its practicing in crossing water obstacles, such as river using this M3 amphibious rig. But for now, just a couple of last words about what exactly Ukrainians do in order to continue winning in this war. And first of all, reportedly they started modernizing F-16 missiles, which used to be air-to-air targets, which now then to be used land-to-air, and they will potentially be using them to intercept Russian missiles and, most importantly, Shahid drones. And ultimately, Ukrainians already finished testing these small remote control cars/off-road mini drones, which they will be able to attach some explosives to it and get as close to the Russian military vehicles as possible, to obviously then detonate them. And trust me, the explosion is pretty big. It is capable of destroying military armored vehicles. And the best part about this is that you will obviously not need to be extremely close to this remote control car. The range of this is up to 6 kilometers. It can drive for 2-3 hours on a single charge at a speed of approximately 24 to 25 kilometers per hour. So it might feel like a small thing, but it is details which make countries win major wars. And so yes, now as promised, let me give you a very interesting update from the east, where Russian so-called punishment holes were spotted, and then we'll go to the south of Ukraine for even more intriguing updates. And first of all, before we go there, if you don't mind and if you like this style of daily updating, if you don't mind, can you please like this video and subscribe to my channel to help spread my work. So thank you so much for this, guys. And if you want, you can follow me on Instagram to see how I live outside of YouTube. The link is down below. And so yes, speaking about these punishment holes, as you can see from these satellite images, they were noticed in several Russian military camps, both on the territory of Ukraine and on the territory of Russia. And according to some Russian soldiers, whether these were just intercepted phone calls or maybe this information was given out during them being captured as prisoners of war, these holes are actually being used to punish those Russian soldiers, especially the ones who are drinking a lot during war, no surprise here, or the ones which are just not following orders or being rebellious, or the ones probably who do not go and attack whenever their officers force them to sacrifice themselves. This information was confirmed by several different Russian sources, and after all we do have satellite images, which basically means most likely it is true. And also reportedly those punished Russian soldiers, they can be there for days or even weeks. They are fed only once per day, and some of them they cannot stand this punishment, and they are being eliminated. Well, there you have it. And now let's go to Kharkiv region, where as a result of Ukrainians intercepting one of Russian drones, debris fell on the ground and it destroyed a local residential building. But just overall, in the last 24 hours, Ukrainians were able to intercept all 6 of Russian Shahid drones. Next, we refer to the report by the Institute for the Study of War, which claims that Russians continued their offensive along Kupiansk-Svatove-Crimea front line and even made some gains, which are not yet confirmed by this map. At the same time, Ukrainians, they're focusing their attacks around Bakhmut, and they're also being there relatively successful, but still, nevertheless, the majority of Russian offensive comes to us from Avdiivka. And probably one of the best videos of today is the video of another Ukrainian small drone destroying another heavy flamethrower of Russians called Solntsepek. The consequences of this destruction are truly devastating. As we go to Bakhmut, Ukrainians reportedly were able to destroy a command post of Russians located in Kurodyumivka, and then also an assault group of Russians along with their tank in Zaitsev. And as we get closer to Donetsk region, another Russian raider called Zoopark, worth of approximately up to $15 million, guess what? Has been destroyed with a $400 drone. The best investment ever, as always. And by the way, if you remember, we spoke about the complete inefficiency of these so-called grill nets, which protecting Russian military vehicles from the drones, and yeah, like I said, they're pretty ineffective. Right here we have a video which conveniently confirms this idea, because Russian infantry fighting vehicle is driving around with no clear directions or anything, and then it is being destroyed by a Ukrainian drone. The grill net on top did not help at all. And speaking about Avdiivka, you might remember this hill located to the north of this settlement, which Russians already claimed twice that they captured. They claimed it the first time, and apparently it was not captured. Then several days later they said that they captured this hill again, and it was still not captured. Guess what? Today they mentioned that they captured this hill for the third time, but this time, yes, they did provide us with this picture of a Russian flag on top of this hill, and even the video of the flag being alone on top of it. And the Russian soldiers, according to Ukrainian side, as soon as they installed their flag, they immediately retreated. So the probability of them actually capturing it this time is also again questionable. Well, let's see if it's gonna happen this time. But for now, let's quickly go to the south of Ukraine for the similar quick update, and then we'll talk about Ukrainians planning to weaponize this upcoming winter. And first of all is a pretty interesting video from Kherson region, where a local Ukrainian farmers they help to demine their own fields. This is a pretty dangerous thing they're doing, but in case they are successful, and according to this video all of them are, it provides an immeasurable support for the Ukrainian forces. And Ukrainians themselves, on the other hand, they use the aviation at this point and launch attacks against Russians on the left side of Kherson region. And besides that, Russians continue their attempts for some reason, most likely to collect the intelligence data, to cross Dnipro river in these small boats with only units of 2 to 3 people, and they do it during the day, with absolutely no cover, which basically means that Ukrainians are easily spotting them and destroy these small single-use boats with a single drone. And speaking about Kherson itself, we have a relatively neutral news today. According to the same report by the Institute for the Study of War, Russians even were able to push some of Ukrainians a little bit back, but neither of Ukrainians reportedly crossed Dnipro river back to the other side of Kherson region. So this is just a temporary setback. Ukrainians are not leaving, reinforcements are coming, and the liberation of Kherson region will happen most likely in the near future. And speaking about Zaporozhye region, where the combat activities slowed down significantly recently, we do have one of the very first videos of the US infantry fighting vehicle called Bradley in action, and you can see that this is a pretty powerful machine. But without a doubt, the most significant event of the last 24 hours, according to President Zelensky, is that he refers to his own intelligence data, is that he is able to see that Russians are gradually fleeing Crimean Peninsula. This first originally started with the Russian Navy doing this, after these successful attacks by Ukrainians against Sevastopol Russian Black Sea Navy headquarters. And now it looks like that even some other soldiers, including also civilians, they also started to retreat deep inside the peninsula, and some of them they crossed the border and moved back to Russia itself. Zelensky also mentioned that all these bases in Crimea are no longer safe from Ukrainian attacks, and even though right now the Crimea itself is not yet under 100% fire control, it is just a matter of time before it is. And that is why Russian, both military personnel and civilians, they should consider as soon as possible leaving the peninsula if they want to save their lives. Because after all, just like he mentioned in the very beginning of the war, the liberation of Crimea is also included in the victory plan for Ukrainians. They will not leave Crimea under Russian control. And potentially we do have some pretty good news coming very soon, because it looks like, according to Western military experts, is that Ukrainians came up with simply genius and at the same time mind-blowing plan for the victory in this upcoming winter. And long story short, what it means is that Ukrainians plan to quote-unquote weaponize this winter. What it basically means is that Ukrainians already received long-range missiles from the US, attack MS. I hope I said it correctly. And if you also remember, according to Mikhailo Podolyak, Americans will continue indefinitely, according to him, continue supplying these attack MS missiles, which basically means that Ukrainians will have a lot of Russian targets in their range. And this is only the first part of this plan. The second plan is that, as you can see right now, there are some kind of combat activities in Kherson. Then there are some combat activities in Zaporozhye region, which decreased significantly, but they still keep going. Then there are also combat activities, obviously, in the east in Avdiivka. And then don't forget about Bakhmut. Even though there are no major liberations, combat activities between Russians and Ukrainians continue there as well, and something what we're talking about every single day. Combat activities along Kupiansk-Svatovo-Kreminna front line. So hopefully by now you already see where I'm going. Russians are spreading themselves extremely thin, all the way from Kupiansk in the east of Ukraine to the south, to Kherson region. Everywhere across this massive front line there are some sort of combat activities. And guess what? The Russian logistics already struggles a lot, being constantly attacked by Ukrainians. And with the arrival of attack MS missiles, it will become even more complicated for Russians to bring reinforcements, supplies, and evacuate the ones who are injured. And as of right now, the main assumption is the following, is that Russians are being spread so thinly across the entire Ukraine. The logistics is already disrupted and will become even worse in the future as soon as Ukrainians start to attack them. And with the arrival of winter, obviously cold weather, these supplies and reinforcements which Russians will need so much will simply be in extremely limited supply, which basically will mean that a lot of Russian soldiers will simply freeze or starve, making them obviously ineffective combat units. And just keep in mind that this does not even involve Ukrainians actively pushing across the front lines. All they need to do is to destroy distant objects of Russians behind the front lines with the missiles which are coming. Last winter, if you remember, it was mainly Russian attacks against the energy infrastructure of Ukraine, and this time it will be Ukraine's turn. So let's see, because the winter is coming. We are long overdue for some major changes in this war, and it does feel like that something will happen soon, so if you don't want to miss this, just please consider subscribing to my channel, only takes one click. And if you guys want to support my work and also get an early access to fully uncensored episodes of The Russian Dude, in addition to all the other extra content, please go ahead and check my Patreon, starting only as little as $4 for the entire month. There's 1 week of free access for you to see if you like it or not, and the link is down below. Thank you so much, patrons, for your support, and see you tomorrow.